Hello everyone, my name is Victor Monga. I am serving as chapter leader for Fuel Community. With me today, I have Naomi George, CISO of Pacific Dental, and Bruce Embry, CTO of Palo Alto Networks, Cortex XDR. Today, our topic is about how security leaders are thinking about XDR and exactly what use cases are being solved by XDR. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Naomi for a quick introduction about you, your organization, and then Bruce.
Thank you, Victor. So as Victor says, my name is Naomi George. I lead the security and passively IT function at Pacific Dental Services. We are a national DSO, a dental support organization, providing IT and other business services to about 900 dental offices across 26 states. And we happen to use XDR. So excited about the conversation today. I can share some insights and why we're using it and how we're using it today.
And my name is Bruce Embry. I am the CTO for the Cortex division of Palo Alto Networks. Cortex is where we build the majority of the tooling, the majority of the connective tissue, if you will, for the SOC of Palo Alto Networks. So we are trying to build the components that allow our SOC engineers to defend Palo Alto Networks at scale and with a minimum number of personnel.
So gentlemen, as we have seen, and again, it is an evolving landscape. We have started with users and we started with endpoints. Now we have users roaming endpoints. We have network across public and cloud. We have email. We have browsing where most of the phishing attacks are occurring. We have network access, and then we have SaaS solutions. I mean, again, we have a whole gamut, and every organization, in order to really produce well, in order to satisfy your customers, we need all of that. Naomi, first question is for you, actually. How do you continuously monitor and analyze the security controls in your security stack to make sure that your strategies align with that and your security program is maturing every time?
A good question. I think, before you get to the question of how you analyze the controls, the first thing you need to do is make sure you have a balanced set of controls across your estate. Most organizations are guilty of having controls that are skewed to the left. And what I mean by that is if you kind of take the MITRE framework as you go from identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover, a lot of solutions tend to do the identification and the detection phase, and they've done that pretty well over time. I think where a lot of organizations struggle is being able to respond to attacks, especially doing that in real time. And then in the event that you do have an event that becomes an incident and you need to recover your data or recover to some type of previous stable state of operation, there's a lack of tools or depth of the tools in that area. So I will always start there. Do I have the right spread of technical controls across my organization? First things first. And then as it relates to the effectiveness of the tools that I have, you've got to understand your key metrics. And that's something that has been talked about in virtually all security circles from the onset. But when you look across several organizations, very little maturity exists in this state. And what I mean by this is, as a security leader, what does my operation team bringing to me every day to say, these are the IOCs we're looking at, these are the risks, these are the metrics that we're pulling from all of these systems, how am I able to use them at that executive level? Then as you come down to the operational level, what are they looking out for? For instance, taking XDR, am I looking at particular users who have incidents of malware on their machine? Am I looking at certain users who are abusing privileges? Am I looking at users whose PCs endpoints are not regularly updated? Every tool has a plethora of metrics and reports that you can get out of these tools, but you've got to be clear on what matters most to your organization. Make sure you're tracking those and that those get bubbled up to the relevant teams who can take action. And that's the critical thing about metrics, reporting, effectiveness, and maturity. They must be numbers and metrics, KPIs, KRIs, that you can then use to take action within your organization.
If I could contribute there, you're absolutely dead on. If you're collecting data that you don't need and is not relevant to a threat or a security decision, then you have gone right back to using a SIM. The whole promise of the SIM was to be able to give you, I'll call it efficient detection across your entire organization. Instead, what it turned into was a giant data store that stored data endlessly and became more expensive because it was stored and priced based on the volume of storage that you were committed to. So you were storing everything unnecessarily. And if you're collecting unnecessary telemetry and you're not doing anything with it, then all you're doing is creating noise and expense.
And you both are absolutely right. SIEM was something that people thought it's going to be game changer, that they're going in, storing everything, and SIEM is providing the signature-based analytics. Eventually, the solutions or even the same company started bringing behavioral analytics, added to it as on the name of threat analytics. For our audience, I think just to set the stage, let's kind of give a quick fundamental basic definition of where we see EDR, NDR, XDR. Naomi, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I will simplify this to some degree and say, EDR solutions essentially focus on the endpoint, right? So anything that has an agent you can install on a PC, in some cases a tablet or a server, although some EDR solutions are probably not great for servers, that's essentially an EDR. And it does some level of response, which for the most part is basic response. So it can stop an executable file from running. It may be able to block certain files from executing on your machine and so on. That's essentially an EDR solution. I'll talk about an NDR solution next. Your NDR solutions kind of started from the network traffic analytics space. We really just analyzed network traffic. It was really aimed at on-prem environments. You get an appliance, you plug it into your core switch or some abstraction layer on top of your core switch, and it tracks everything on your network and is able to apply some level of intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, depending on what vendor you're speaking to. And then it's able to respond. Some of them will do that autonomously, meaning within their own ecosystem, and others will rely on integration with other SOAR or response vendors to take action. The NDR market is very interesting because of a lot of the markets and hype around the use of AI. But as organizations evolve and are less reliant on the data centers and they move into the cloud, and also as the future of work and the way we work changes to a lot of people being remote, you've got to look very carefully at your NDR solution to make sure it's able to scale with your business and the user patterns within your organization. And then you come into XDR, which for me is kind of the holy grail and where the puck is going in this industry, because XDR then combines elements of those two solutions. And XDR allows you to install an agent on an endpoint, so you can get telemetry from your endpoints, PCs and servers. You're able to pull information from your network, which also depends on the level of architecture, whether you're cloud-centric or not, but to some degree doesn't matter as much, because good XDR solutions would have appliances or cloud connectors that would feed in from your SaaS providers, your IaaS providers, as well as your on-prem providers. So you take all that together, and Bruce mentioned earlier in his introduction about the Cortex data lake solution. So all of a sudden you have all of these different nodes, let's just call them that, on your network, assets on your network, all feeding into the same data lake. You now apply a level of intelligence above it that is able to then take action in real time, rather than just being this gigantic repository of logs from an almost infinite amount of sources, some of which you never need. And the ability to pull that all together, do the detection, the intelligence, and the response, that is what an XDR offers you.
Absolutely. And you have to be cognizant of the use of encryption inside networks. The use of encryption makes it more difficult to have a network-based detection and response component that is really useful. So you have to be using the telemetry from the endpoint, yes, but you have to be stitching that. And that's what we call it in our technology, is stitching, where we're taking the behavior of a specific user or the behavior of an application on an endpoint that may or may not have users logged into it. We're taking that behavior on the endpoint and we're stitching that with their behavior on the network. So we're seeing them as they transit from subnet to subnet in places where we have our Palo Alto firewalls or our other sensors deployed around the network. Now you have an opportunity to put together a complete picture of the behavior of a user or a process and what it's not only doing on the endpoint where it resides or functions, but also in the network where it lives. What is it doing as it relates to the rest of your network? Is it trying to connect to other shares? Is it trying to connect to other servers? What's the function that it's trying to do there? When you build efficient profiles around that, then you can understand at scale when things are misbehaving.
So that's a great segue, right, to detection and response industry. So where we have SIEM, we have SOAR, we have threat intelligence, we have EDR, NDR, MDR, email, identity solutions, and they all are popping alerts. They all are actually generating alerts for SOC analysts to look at it. And if they are not stitched, if the context is not provided, alert exhaustion is very real, simply because too little information, which requires too much research. Nami, how did your team handle alert fatigue or incident handling before you guys had XDR?
Well, I think, our story would not be dissimilar from other, clients in this space. What happens pre a detection and response solution like an XDR is you never have enough people to look at all the things that you need to look at. So you focus on the things that you think matter to you. And at minimum, that in my world would be looking at email, looking at things like your identity and access management solution, making sure that you don't have the usual suspects like impossible travel, brute force attack, password spraying, and things like that. On the network level, you look at firewall logs and all that, which, in 20 plus years of doing this, I don't know how many people are super effective or can truly claim to be super effective at reviewing firewall logs and making determinations. For the most part, we look at firewall logs after the fact when we're doing an investigation, not in the line of preventing or protecting the organization. So essentially, that's what you do. You work based on the number of hours in the day, the amount of tooling you have, and the maturity of those stats. And the bottom line is that you miss things. There is never, you just can't cover all of those data points effectively. And then the other thing that you're not able to do is you're certainly not, at least as humans, able to correlate on a large scale. And so even when you find point incidents or events, you're dealing with that and you go in a particular rabbit hole and you don't have the ability to look at that 60,000 foot view, as we say in security, to see if there's correlation across the rest of your organization, which then leads to the lack of our ability as security professionals to then really do attribution to say, based on all the correlation we have, I can say to some degree of certainty that this attack stemmed from this trajectory. We're not able to do that. Now, coming to the XDR space, a lot of what I've just described, the log sources, the parsing through or the stitching of those disparate log sources together, the correlation of different attack vectors to threat sources and hosts, they're all in the same data soup, if you like. You then put in the threat intelligence that Cortex and solutions like this provide. And very quickly, you're able to pivot from looking at a bad IP, a bad actor, a targeted host. You're able to do all of that in seconds and minutes. Whereas in the past, we would have had to export some of that into CSV files and have to run pivot tables and other things to try and get some common denominator across our network. So simply put, it saves us a lot of time. It allows us to be consistent. And then if you have the maturity within your XDR solution, then you're able to allow a degree of automation meaning that when you're not there, because no one works 24/7, right? But when you're not there, you allow the systems to take some level of action, decision making to respond in the event of a threat. And so that's kind of where you want to go, and that's what we're doing now with XDR.
Nimi is dead on. He is within the scope of our SOC right now. We are handling right at 36 billion alerts per day, and we're doing that with 10 analysts. Those 10 analysts only work 8 to 5 in the time zones where they live. Right now, today, our detection metric is 10 seconds across all 36 billion events per day in our network, and our response metric inside of our SOC is 1 minute across all 36 billion. It can be done.
And in a similar vein, I was looking at the, obviously compared to Palo Alto, smaller network footprint, but across the 6 months coming up to the end of June, we had 17 million events, significant events across our network. And of those 17 million events, there were 99 of them that, going through the technology stack we have, there were 99 of them that were worth a human analyst getting involved with. And when you think about that number and that scale, it really begs the question how, to your question, Victor, how any of us were truly doing this in the past without the technology. Because we see the things that we see, and we do the best we can do. But when you look at that number, 17 million people event, how many members of my security operations team would I need dedicated to just passing through lots of logs and take the time required? The fact that over the high 90s and 90% of that number will end in essentially a dead end, right? Even if I had all the people to do the work, 99+% of it will end in nothing. And if you were a security analyst and that's what you had to do, go down dark rabbit holes every day that ended up with no true business purpose, although you can argue there is, because at least you close the loop. That's not going to enthuse a lot of people to come to work every day, that's for sure.
And that's partly, I think, one of the reasons why security industry or the job market in cybersecurity is that if you want to get into cybersecurity, let's put you as a SOC analyst, because eventually that's the only place people are not attracted towards, but they need to get into it. I think it should be the other way around, to be honest. If they're given the right tools and right information, I think this job can be really interesting, to your point. And the numbers you both have stated, I think that really justify for a security leader to really explain the benefits, time to value of the solution. Why do they need it for organization? A lot of times, a lot of security professionals or even leaders are asked, even though you're deploying automation, why can't you reduce the headcount? And I think that's a question I want to pose to both of you. Even though we have automation now, we're not reducing the headcount, because at the end of the day, we were not actually catching up before. So what's your take on that?
I think, first of all, I'll answer it this way. Machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, and all of these innovations and breakthroughs are super, super important. But there is always going to be the need for some type of human analyst, because the one thing that a lot of technology can't do, at least not effectively, is they're not able to understand context. Now, let me explain it this way. The premise for a lot of machine learning today is understanding anomalies, right? What is not normal? What is out of the norm within your organization? The fact that something is out of the ordinary or hasn't been seen before doesn't necessarily make it malicious or make it a threat. And so you do need some level of human analyst. The key thing, to your point, is making sure that the humans are brought in where they should be brought in and not brought to do things that humans are historically horrible at doing, which is doing the high volume, low complexity, repetitive, mundane things on clockwork every single day. And that's where machines excel. So I think first things first, humans, machines, or technology will always have a role to play. The key thing is getting the right balance, putting them where their strengths lie. And the second point, I think, Victor, you already made that point quite clearly, which is that a lot of organizations are simply not staffed appropriately. And so when the C-suite and the finance folks say, well, now you have all this automation, surely you should be giving me some headcount back. Well, if you were a traditional compliance-driven organization with a bunch of people sitting in your SOC just so you could say you had people, perhaps there are some people to give back. But the vast majority of organizations are clearly not staffed that way. And so giving them the tools to do their job simply is that, giving them the tools to do their job and doing it effectively. So, but every organization is different. And so this definitely is not a one-size-fits-all answer. Just you've got to work out what works best for you.
Most of the orgs that I encounter are critically understaffed. They have insufficient personnel to be doing the work that those personnel are already doing. That is the reason why they have high turnover and they have challenges keeping their personnel. Machine learning, if I could give you an analog, it is a brilliant idiot. Machine learning is just math. It's statistics, doing work that is truly amazing. It can see things and find relationships that humans can never do. But humans have the wisdom that is needed to bring that together and make it relevant to the organization where it's being used. That's why we can't get rid of the people, but we can empower those people to be more successful at what they were doing.
One of our fellow CISOs actually, he always said machine learning is the intelligence, but you still need the human wisdom. Bruce, what you mentioned right now, where you just can't get rid of humans. And again, if your board, if you're a security leader, if your board is asking that, hey, now that you have automation, can you give me some headcount back? Well, had we done it right, I would have needed 90 people. You gave me 5. I'm just catching up that gap that you had created with the solutions, because with the additional context now, I can do that job effectively with 5 people. You should have started with 90 people, and then I could have given you maybe 85 back. You didn't give me those people to begin with. I need to augment that. I need to bridge that gap with the right solutions, such as XDR, to do the job effectively, which we were doing it. We were limping along, but now we're actually doing it effectively. Bruce, when it comes to XDR, when we talk about XDR, it's always DR is the part, detection and response. What about recover? Does XDR also helps with recover part as well?
XDR can help you roll back in time. It can help you go back to a previous point in your enterprise and restore you to a place where you have been previously. However, sometimes that recovery isn't all that you need. Sometimes you need more than that. We actually have a group internally here at Palo Alto Network called Unit 42. And Unit 42 is an IR response firm. They are designed to be put on your insurance as your provider of choice in case you have an event and you need to call in outside support that has to be well documented, specifically for cases of compliance, insurance, or otherwise. So Unit 42 is the place where we have made that real, where we can have boots on the ground, as they say, helping you recover from a ransomware attack or other event that is security related inside your organization. And that is, so XDR, yes, it has a place where it can help you restore in the event of compromise of an endpoint, but sometimes it has to be bigger than that. Sometimes you need outside help. And your insurance company, if you'll look, you'll probably find us already on that list. But if we're not there, then certainly you should consider adding Unit 42 to your cyber insurance.
Maybe as a security leader, when you actually purchased XDR and you started leveraging it, were your board of directors or executives or even your leaders were asking this question where, how can we make sure that we can reduce a cost somewhere? Is there any place we can now reduce the cost because now we have XDR? Is there any line item we can remove because we have XDR?
So I would say in that sense, I'm a bit lucky with my organization. And let me qualify that a little. So when I started my current role back in 2016, I was employee number 1 as far as security was concerned. And so I remember working with my leadership team at the time, and I built this, think about it as a bullseye. So I kind of built like rings around, and I said, okay, year 1, maturity level, we're 0. this is what we need to invest. And I broke it down into user security, network security, data security, and I kind of went around that way. And then I did year 2, year 3, year 4, all the way till year 5. It was initially a 5-year plan. And what I was able to show them is the investment based on the level of maturity that we had at the time and how that investment was going to tail off as we built the maturity. And so to your question, no, I haven't had to have that conversation because I guess I had the conversation ahead of time and said, look, I'm not going to come in every year asking you to invest, millions of dollars in security. Right now, there's a massive gap and we need to do this investment. And I've stayed true to that. And so even now, when I do change or, make investments in security products, for the most part, I'm replacing something because it's not as effective or the market has moved on. The technology architecture landscape has changed and there's something more effective. But I'm not constantly going to them asking for more money to invest into my security tech stack. And so, but for most organizations, I don't have that. Absolutely. There's this sometimes I think we get the argument wrong. In security, we always talk about defense in depth, or we talk about layered security. And what layered security ends up meaning in the real world is lots and lots of overlap. So you have lots of technology that kind of overlap themselves, and we're quick to bring in new to solve for a new use case, but we don't take the time to decommission older technology that may just, not today give you the coverage that they once did. And so boards are right in asking security leaders to, what's going to, has something got to give? And in some cases, the answer is yes, something has got to give. You just cannot keep layering technology upon technology and ending up with a lot of overlap, especially as I mentioned earlier, sometimes when this happens, the overlap happens in the identify and the detect phase, very little further down the stack. And as organizations, you've got to make sure that you're balanced in your approach.
We were very fortunate in our SOC at Palo Alto Networks that we found that implementing XDR and getting these technologies put together, that we were able to remove things. We were able to remove things like Splunk and Phantom and ServiceNow and Tanium and other components that were, yes, overlapping and weren't contributing as much as we wanted to our final security posture. So it was important to be able to remove those things and gain back the money that we had been spending on those things previously that turned out to be then unnecessary. It was nice to be able to recover that. But for my dollar, for my time, I am more focused on the efficacy of the defense of us as a security company, because as Palo Alto, we have the mandate of action where we have to put security first, and money always has to take a back seat to make sure that we don't become a source of a supply chain compromise for you, our customers. So for us, it was efficacy first.
Maybe any advice you would give to your fellow CISOs when they are considering about XDR in their organization?
Well, I always go back to architecture and understanding your business. And, I mentioned this early on when I talked about NDR solutions. In a lot of organizations, the sales cycle can be rather protracted sometimes. So what I mean by that is you could start having a conversation about, NDR, or say a data center centric disaster recovery as a service solution. And then 2 years later, you haven't purchased a solution, right? You're still going through the cycle. But in the meantime, your technology stack has drastically changed. You've moved away from being totally on-prem. You're now more cloud-centric. You're enabling your users to work from home. You don't have traffic hairpinning through your network. People are able to go straight to cloud and SaaS resources, just as an example. Your tech stack has got to change to reflect the realities of your organization. And so my advice to security leaders is be in sync with your tech stack and make sure that whatever controls you apply, XDR being one of those controls, make sure it's applicable and is relevant to not just your current state, but to the state you're going to be in 3, say 5 years, and then make that investment. The concept, and this is why I like XDR in particular, because the concept of XDR, being able to aggregate these different log sources, these different tools or metrics, telemetry into one and you being able to take action, that is going to transcend technology maturity, because it really doesn't matter. You would always need a solution that can do that. Make sure that whatever solution you get is able to work within your environment. And when you have SaaS applications, make sure you have APIs and other things built in, so you can get the best visibility. And not just visibility, you have the ability to take action, because in some cases tools will give you visibility, they just don't have the deep level integration that allows them to take the action that you want. So it's all, the tech stands on its own. You've got to make sure it works within your specific environments and use case.
I would agree completely. If all you're doing is, in your journey to a cloud resource, if all you're doing is lifting and shifting your data center centric design into the cloud, you're absolutely doing it wrong. And you're going to end up regretting it. The return on investment will not be coming back to you in the way that you think it will be.
Well, last question is for you, Bruce. So here's a joke question, and then I'll ask you a serious question. Funny question is that if you have to go back 5 years or 6 years, given a blank check, and would have to build XDR all over again, anything would you change, or would you keep it the way it is?
Every scar that we attained along the way was critical to helping us understand the bones that were beneath the surface. I wouldn't take back the things that we have endured, because each one of them taught us a valuable lesson. It's nice to think of being able to come through life without scars, but those, as I've heard so many times, true wisdom only comes from pain. And that pain made us what we are.
And from here, where do you think that XDR will evolve? So if the XDR is the one solution, what else should XDR be looking at next generation or next part of XDR?
The next iteration of XDR will be focused on turning the detections into an automated response that is broader than simply quarantining an endpoint. It will be attaching automation cases to it that could be enforcing a password change for the user. It could be deactivating their badge so they can't get on the premises anymore. It could be the recharacterization of a website that was previously thought to be benign, but is now known to be malignant. That automation flow through should happen from the endpoint. The detection and response that happens there should now propagate to your entire enterprise. So you can take that endpoint as a sensor, and it becomes endpoint as the beginning of a tool set that cascades globally through your entire organization. That's where XDR should go.
Well, gentlemen, on behalf of Fuel community, we really thank you for your time. Appreciate all the insights, and I'm sure our community will be looking forward to hearing more from you.